now. So welcome everyone. And Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us all about mulch and microbes. Susan, I just unmuted you. I'm sorry
Oh,
about that.
good. Yeah. Okay. So I promised the watering team that I would let you guys know to be mindful of where the watering lines go. So, like it's between aisle 1 and 2 or gardens 1 and 2. Um, that's where all the water lines run. And so we ask that you don't take wheelbarrows full of soil or composted manure or anything down the aisles that have the water lines on them, because they're just underneath the soil in some places and could break pretty easily. So just if you see the water lines on an aisle, just use the opposite aisle to go down, and then we won't be breaking things. So today, thanks to Mary Schulte and Kathy Hicken, I have got all of their wonderful notes, and we're going to go over their presentation about how to have healthy soil. Maybe. It's being obnoxious. I shouldn't have played with my computer this morning. So what we're looking for with microbes and mulch is to have healthy soil. And with healthy soil, we get better seed germination, greater root growth, we get disease protection and pest resistance. And that's because healthy soil has an active biology that helps prepare the nutrients in the soil so that the plants can absorb them. And these microorganisms are key to converting the organic and inorganic materials in our soil into usable forms. So that's why we want healthy soil. To get healthy soil, it's to start from the ground down. It's alive and it's filled with carbon. And we want it to start from the ground down because that's where our roots are. And so we want it as healthy as we can get it so that the roots can get what they need to do. And then we can get healthy plants because they start from the ground up. They're going to use everything that we put in our soil to make it great. And the world below your garden is alive. It's full of living organisms that contribute or are detrimental to your soil. And so you want the soil fauna and mites and nematodes and earthworms, ants, insects that spend all of their time under the ground that are breaking down the soil and breaking down the nutrients. And for the experienced gardener, you'll remember that every fall we put in beneficial nematodes into our gardens. And that's because they will eat the larvae of the pests that are underneath the ground, such as the tomato root knot nematode that is a detrimental nematode, and it tends to tie your roots into knots, and then your tomatoes don't grow very well. So that's one of the things that we add to help make our soils a living, breathing space. As you can see, the plant has different options for obtaining nutrients, gets its energy from the sunlight, and when the plant breathes, it breathes in carbon dioxide and exhales oxygen. So just the opposite of us, and it needs that carbon dioxide to turn into the organic carbon that the plants need for changing nutrients into starch and sugar, so we get the great potatoes and the great tomatoes and other fruits off of our vegetables that's stored in the fruit of the vegetable. The roots also will take up some carbon dioxide and oxygen, but they are mostly doing water and the minerals that are down underneath the soil. And this is one reason that we ask you not to water the leaves of your plants, because they really don't absorb water through their leaves for the most part. It's done with your roots. So you really, really want good, healthy root system. And to do this, you have to have good soil that's alive. Another way to look at this is that the carbon cycle is a continuous cycle. So the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere during photosynthesis will change into the organic carbon that we need in our soil. And once that carbon is in the soil, it's going to be picked up, as I said before, with the roots of the tree. And the animals that are living, the organisms that are living in the ground are also going to be eating this and making the nutrients more amenable to uptake from the roots. So the microbes that we want in our garden are bacteria and fungi, nematodes, any of those things that are going to break down our soil. One thing that you'll hear a lot of us get really excited over is the fact that we have worms in our garden, because nothing helps break down the soil and help the nutrients become available to the plant like the worms do. And so if you have worms, awesome. But if you need to get some worms in your garden, we can help you do that. But remember, your soil has to be full of nutrients, or all the worms you put in your garden is going to go visit somebody else's garden that is more appealing to them. The microbes also help discourage soil-borne diseases and pests. So we want them living below the surface. So I don't know if you knew, I didn't even think of this until I saw Mary's presentation last year. On that paper clip that is on the screen, it will hold over 2 million microbes in that little space there. So that's how many microbes we have in the soil that we don't even see. So think about your 25 by 6 garden and how many paper clips would fill that. That's how many microbes are running around that we want to keep healthy. So I want microbes. How do I get them? How do I keep them? Mulch, mulch, and more mulch is what we're going to use. So mulch is to feed and protect your soil. I kind of look at mulch and compost in a couple of different ways. I see compost full of nutrients, full of all the stuff that's going to make my clay soil more amenable to water, more amenable to air, spaces in there so that it doesn't get compacted as much as it would if I didn't have compost in it. So when I think compost, I think put it on the garden and mix it in well. When I think of mulch, I think of a less nutrient dense material that covers the garden soil so that it keeps the soil cooler and it keeps the water retention so we don't use as much water. So it's kind of a vital piece to this. And it helps keep the nutrients in your soil. So there's two kinds of mulch: landscape, and it's organic, and agricultural, and it's organic and living. And mulch is any material, organic or inorganic, that you can place over the surface of the soil over the root zone of growing plants. The landscape mulches are things like your films and bark, rocks, grass, glass instead of grass, cardboard. You wouldn't think cardboard would be classified organic, but it takes a long time for it to break down. The other thing is that some of the barks are decorative and they contain chemicals to put the color on the bark, and we don't want those chemicals in the garden. So please don't use any colored decorative bark in the garden spaces. The agricultural mulch can be organic, and we're talking things like composted manure that you can get in the back of the garden, sawdust, wood chips, newspapers, plant clippings, straw, films, used carpet, and living mulch. And so we will talk a little bit more in depth about those mulches as we go through. So we want to mulch with something to suppress our weeds, because I don't know about you, but I hate pulling weeds. And it holds in the moisture. It modifies the soil temp. So if you think about it, when the soils are really hot, we can cool them down. We can also warm them up using the darker films if we need to plant early. And it lessens the chance of soil-borne disease, and it can be very attractive depending on what you put on there or not. I kind of like gardens filled with mulch because it looks clean and it keeps the ground tidy. The downside of mulching is that it can decay very quickly. Think about shredded newspaper and putting that on your garden. It's not going to stay there very long. And that's okay, because it's adding nutrients to your plants. You're just going to have to reapply it. There are several natural products that will add acidity. And this is your wood chips, your pine needles, because they are very acidic. However, they only, when you mix them in, that's when you're going to have to test your soils to make sure that you're not getting your soil too acid. You want to keep the pH levels between 6.5 and 7, so you may have to make some adjustments. The other thing with wood chips is the ones that we're putting around the outside of the garden can be used for your mulch. They don't decay that easily, and you would have to move them off at the end of the year to get down to amend your soil. The wood chips that you can get at Tractor Supply that I used last year are much finer and they decay a little quicker. The problem with those is right at the top of the soil, they need the nitrogen to decay. So you really don't want to get them too far into your garden soil. If you're just using it as the mulch, you're okay because your plants are getting their nutrients from further down. Some of the mulching can pack down, it can get hard, it can get crusty. Pine needles and other light substances blow away. If you put unseasoned manure or manure that isn't quite ready to go on to your garden, it can burn your plants. So we usually do not bring fresh manure in for your use. And mulching may keep your soil too cool. So you need to think about what kind of plants you're mulching around. For example, tomatoes like really warm soil, and if you mulch them too soon, they are not going to grow as well. So some things that to keep in mind is if you're using grass clippings or leaf mulch or any of those kinds of things, make sure that you don't have herbicides that have been used on them. Some of them may have weed seeds in them. Hay often has seeds in it for weeds, so you want to be careful with that. Peat moss, water can't always get through it, and it's expensive. It's a limited resource, so we don't encourage using that. So just be very aware of what you're putting on and what you want to get out of the mulching exercise.
Susan, we have a couple of questions that
Okay.
might help people out. The first one is, can we use oak leaves as mulch?
Oak leaves have a lot of wax in them, so they don't break down like other leaves will, like aspen leaves or some of those. So you could use them knowing that they're not going to break up, but also knowing they're going to blow all over the place. So we have not encouraged oak leaves or pine needles, even though I wish we could, because then I wouldn't have to buy any mulch ever.
And the other question is, can you explain the differences between the piles in the back of the garden? And in line with that, can you tell them which piles might be mulch?
Okay, we have no mulch at this point in time. Or excuse me, we have no compost at this point in time. Everything in the back can be used as mulch because it's composted horse manure. And what you see back there has been outside the garden for quite a while. So it is, most of it is very well exposed and will not burn. Anita, can you tell me how he organized them when he was putting it in there? He was going to put some of the fresher stuff in a different bin. You can type it in if you want, or you can tell me later, but they're all steer manure in different seasons of being exposed to the ground. I don't believe any of it will burn your soil. Does that answer the question?
Sounds great.
Okay. So when to mulch. So right now during the spring, we want to plant our cool crops, but most of these cool crops like cool temperatures. So if we're going to mulch, then we should do it after the soil is warm to the touch and your plants are up and growing. If you put it down too early, the soil will never get warm and the soil will stay too wet for your plants to germinate and to do well. So early crops, let the soil warm up and then put your mulch down. The same crops that you are planting now, you will plant again in the fall. And this is when you want to cool the ground for your cool weather crops. So the ground is nice and warm now, so you're going to plant your plants and you're going to cover the ground with mulch so that the ground gets cool. And then as the weather cools, then you want to remove the mulch so that it doesn't keep the ground too warm for the cool weather plants. And for our warm crops, the thing that we really want the mulch to do is to keep our soil moist. So keep your ground clear until the soil is good and warm. The warmer, the better. And then when the weather turns hot, add your mulch so that the water that you are putting on your garden does not evaporate. It goes down where you want it to go. Oh, thank you. I'm not sure what just happened. So how are we going to mulch? One of the best or most commonly used mulch is plastic film. It comes in a variety of colors, and there is some science behind the colors of the plastic film as to which color works better with which plants. So what you want to get is you want to get a thick film, at least 2 to 4 millimeters. I put the wrong thing in there. So that you can put it down so that it does the job that it's supposed to do. The one thing that I can't say enough is if you leave especially black plastic on for a long period of time, you're going to sterilize your garden. One of the gardeners that's over by my garden had a problem with detrimental microbes, and so she put down black film for the entire winter, seeing if she could get rid of the things that were attacking her plants. So if you're putting this on, you need to remember to take it off. So you want to put your water lines under the plastic. You want to test your water lines to make sure that there are no dry spots, no wet spots. Work with it until you've got an even watering system. And then soak your garden a week before you plant. And you want the water to go down at least 6 inches when you are doing this soaking. Then the next week when you're ready to plant, you put your film down and secure it and cut holes in the plastic for your plants that you're planting. And if you're planting seeds, Make sure you have a good slit for the germinating seeds to find their way to the sun. And then cover the plastic with an organic mulch of some sort. It helps it stay down, and it helps keep the warmth into your garden. Organic mulch, you want to water your garden thoroughly. I put my watering system underneath the organic mulch too. I did it with my wood chips, and I have done it with the composted manure. Again, it keeps the water evaporation down. You need to add at least 2 to 3 inches spread evenly around and under your plants. More will keep the weeds down better. As you can see from the wood chips we put around the gardens, that our weeds are not going to come up as much as they did last year. You still may have some, but the more you put down, the better for weed control. The big thing is don't let the mulch touch your plant stems. If you think about it, the root system of a plant is not right where the stem enters the ground. It has spread out. Like a tree, you're going to have your root system out as far as the umbrella of the leaves are. And so you don't want mulch up against the plants because it'll hold too much water there. It'll also let bugs, they like to find that area, and then they can get to your plants a whole lot easier. So try and keep the plant stems free of mulch. Mary's favorite mulch is living mulch. And this is a form of companion planting. So you want to put short-rooted plants alongside your deep-rooted plants. The idea is to cover the ground with living, growing plants. Some of the plants are clover, rye, alfalfa, crown vetch, herbs, and flowers. Not only do the flowers attract your bugs to pollinate your plants, they can also shade the roots of your other plants. But you want to make sure that you add those kinds of plants 4 to 6 weeks after your veggies have started growing. The other thing is things like clover and rye, alfalfa are really good for cover crops during the winter, so that your soil is not laying out there exposed to everything. So there's a couple of ways of using living mulch. Kathy Hickens and Mary Schulte are great resources to find out what kinds of plants to do for living mulch. At the end of the season, please remove all of your inorganic mulch. You can pull, if you use the bigger wood chips, you can pull them to the side, take off any film or any other such organic stuff, because you want to be able to put more organic nutrients into the soil. So you'll turn your organic and living mulch into the soil, and you'll add more from the back of the garden. And if you want, you can then, once you've given your garden the nutrients and stuff it needs to rejuvenate itself over the winter, you can cover your garden either with the cover crops or organic or cardboard or anything like that, so that in the spring you'll have more microbes and things like that in your garden. So to recap this, we need the microorganisms that are growing. Not everything is bad. If you see something and you don't know whether it's good or not for the garden, ask one of the staff members. They can help you decide. When Glenn graciously offers to provide nematodes, let's get them into the garden. And get your worms, feed them, keep them growing, and get your mulch on the ground, especially during the summertime, to keep the ground cool and keep the moisture in, because we lose a lot of water to the atmosphere that our plants aren't getting, even though we are using soaker hoses. Any questions?
Yeah, we have a couple that came up. One is, when do we remove mulch and how do we get rid of straw?
The straw, I am not sure about straw. I think it can be, turned in and it will break down. I would have to ask one of the people that use straw. I've seen people just pull it off and put it back in the pile or throw it away. So.
Yeah, and Susan, I personally just keep my straw in the garden all winter long.
Okay.
And then that allows just a nice covering to save the moisture in the soil when we have a drier winter. Also, can you talk about the benefits of using organic versus the non-organic? So would you prefer to use the plastic or would you prefer to use something organic for your mulch?
I prefer organic because then I can turn it in. I get the benefit of it being keeping my soil cool and moist during the summertime, but then when I turn it in the wintertime, it breaks down and gives me more nutrients. So it gives the microbes and the worms and something to eat during the winter time. So I tend to use the organic. I know one of the gardeners liked carpet pieces that had been turned upside down so that the nap was on the bottom, but it's hard to maneuver those pieces around. So she hasn't used it in the last couple of years. It's just difficult to remove because it gets wet and heavy and dirty. And you have to know where your plants are going to go so that you can put space in between that. I know Mary uses a lot of cardboard and a lot of paper and rice hulls, and that she is truly a organic guru when it comes to mulch and keeping her garden up. I don't think it matters. I think you need to find what's best for you as far as what kind of mulch you want. But because the plastic is going to be there, it's going to do, you won't have to pull weeds, and but it could make your garden too hot too.
Perfect. And then there's one more question, and if anybody else has another question, go ahead and type it in now, because this is the last question that we have. And it's from April, and it says, I thought everything in the garden had to be organic.
It does, but because when we're talking organic versus inorganic for the garden, it's mostly we don't want chemicals of any type in the garden that is going to cause the fruits and vegetables not to be organically grown. If you put plastic over your garden, which is a inorganic thing, it's not getting into the soil. There's nothing that can leach out of that plastic into your soil, and you remove it and then you put it back on again. So in this instance, the organic mulches are okay. That's why we say don't use the colored mulches that look really, really pretty, the reds and the browns that you can get at Home Depot or any other garden store, because they have chemicals in it and those chemicals are going to leach in. But if you used, let's just say you use glass, you had a whole bunch of glass that had rounded edges and you put that on top of your soil, you could take that off. You could put rocks and gravel on top if you wanted to. They don't put anything more into the soil. So that's where inorganic mulches are okay, where inorganic fertilizers and herbicides and that kind of thing are not wanted.
Perfect. We have one last question here. Are the wood chip piles in front of the garden, and if anybody hasn't seen them, I just saw them driving by, they're out in front of the gate. Are they designated for something, or are they fair game?
Right at the moment, Ralph is going to weed eat in front of the fence, and we are going to use those piles to make a border against the grasses and weeds there. So we're going to put that around. But if you go to the back of the area between the garden and the nursing home that's there, or the senior living that is there, there's two piles of wood chips that are free game.
Okay, perfect.
Just like the soil, the cow manure, the manure that's out there too. Once we bring it in, then it's only for the gardeners in the garden.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Susan. I've got a couple announcements. The first one is we're in May, which is awesome. So the garden is now open Mondays through Fridays from 8 a.m. till 11 a.m. And then from 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. And then on Saturdays, it's open from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. And next week, our class is Tomatoes Galore. It'll be at 9 a.m. again. And we have two lovely ladies that are going to share all they know about tomatoes. It's Jane Crafter and Sandra Herr. And it doesn't look like we had any last minute questions. So Susan, just a lot of gratitude for all of your knowledge today and helping everybody out with their questions. And everybody have an absolutely wonderful week and enjoy your garden. Susan, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I was just going to say, if you want to ask me anything, my garden is R1S1. It's the double plot on the east side on the first row. Just come on by. I'm there every Tuesday and Friday morning as the opener. So come on by and I'll help you as much as I can.
Perfect. And there's one last question. Where do we get straw?
You're probably the one to answer that one.
Okay. You can get straw a number of different places. The pet store, or it used to be called Pet Club. It's called something else right as you come into town from Phoenix on the left-hand side. They have it. There are also other people in town that sell straw. And then also you can get it at Tractor Supply. And you can get either bales of straw or you can also get the compressed straw. And I personally like the compressed straw a little bit better. It's a little bit easier to work with personally. And this post, another question was, when will this recording be posted? By tomorrow morning, I will have it on our Pacing Community Garden Facebook page. And I'm not sure when it will be up on the Community Garden website, but just keep watching for that. But it'll be up definitely tomorrow morning on the Facebook page. Perfect. Well, thank you all, and everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks, Leslie, for hosting.
Oh, you're welcome, Susan. Thank you for all your work.